All right, so let's take a look at an animation roadmap. And we're going to learn smarter, not harder. So there's two main ways when you're animating. There's going to be keyframe animation, and then there's going to be dynamics. So keyframe animation is what we're primarily going to focus on in this course. We're getting into a little bit of dynamics, but mostly keyframes. So keyframes, you can think of them as just manual or snapshots in time. That's all we are. We're essentially just taking an object and saying, hey, be on this frame at this point in time. And from a learning curve perspective, the keyframe animation is going to be 80% artistic and then 20% technical. So it's basically going to be more practice equals more progression. There's not a lot of software training when it comes to keyframe animation. So dynamic simulations, particles, explosions, that kind of stuff, that's going to be the exact opposite in terms of learning curve. It's going to be 80% technical and then 20% artistic. So basically, the more training you do, the more you're going to progress. And then in terms of difficulty on this stuff, with keyframes, you really have a big stretch between difficulty. Doing very, very basic props, vehicles, those types of things are going to be more basic. But then there's a huge jump to characters. And this was a classic mistake that I know I made when I first started attempting to animate, is I just went straight to a character, started pushing around keyframes and not having any idea why I was struggling so bad. This is, a decade-long learning curve to be able to get really, really good at characters. I know a lot of really, really talented character animators that essentially that's all they do. If you ask them to model, if you ask them to texture, they won't be able to do any of that kind of stuff. That's because they spend all of their time specializing in just character animation. It's highly, highly, highly specialized. With dynamics, you can basically break it up into two different layers. We're going to have single layered simulations and then multi-layered simulations. So single layered stuff is going to be like rain, fire, smoke, things that the simulation isn't interacting with other simulations, right? Some multi-layered simulations is going to be like explosions, destruction, disintegrations. If you have a building collapse, for example, you're going to have all those rigid bodies, the actual geometry animating, and the geometry is going to drive like smoke and dust and debris. So that's going to be more multi-layered. With that said, Blender's really, really good, modeling, texturing, shading, basic animation, that kind of stuff. When it comes to dynamics, however, Blender's really, really strong at the basics, just doing like very basic single layered simulations. Anything after that, Blender's going to really start to struggle. Programs like Houdini, this is what I always push people that are really, really into dynamic simulations to get into. There's a free personal learning edition. And even like the paid version is very, very cheap. There's an indie version that's only like $200 to $300. But the free version, is fully capable. The limitations are very, very microscopic. So I highly recommend checking that out if you really get into the dynamic stuff.